soft-spoken, steady voice. Welcome, dear listener, to Sleepy Historian, your quiet corner of the past. This is boring history for sleep, where we explore forgotten beliefs, slow histories, and the quiet patterns of life that once shaped our world. If calm storytelling and gentle history help you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. And tell me, softly, in the comments, where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to know who else is out there, half awake, half asleep, drifting through time with me. Tonight, we travel into the dim spaces between dream and fear, into the world of ancient nightmares. For thousands of years, people across civilizations believed that the night was alive with unseen presences. When the world grew still and your breath slowed in the darkness, they thought the boundary between life and spirit thinned. To close one's eyes was to risk encounter, not only with dreams, but with something else. Something that pressed upon the chest, whispered through the air, or stole the strength of the sleeping body. Before science, before psychology, there was imagination. And imagination was a vast and restless thing. The ancient Egyptians spoke of spirits that fed upon restless minds. The Greeks blamed daimons, shadowy beings that slipped between the mortal and divine. The Romans believed in nocturnal visitations sent by gods or ghosts, messengers who rode the threshold of sleep. And far to the north, in colder lands, people whispered of the mare, a spirit that sat upon a dreamer's chest and filled the night with dread. From that word, we inherit the word nightmare. But even as fear haunted their dreams, these ancient peoples found meaning within it. They saw nightmares as omens, warnings, or even prophecies. Some believed that a nightmare could protect them, carrying their anxieties into another world before they awoke, cleansed. Others thought it a punishment, a visitation born of guilt or neglect. And some, quietly, believed that nightmares were simply the language of the soul, speaking truths that daylight could not bear. So tonight, we'll wander through those old beliefs, softly, slowly, following the rhythm of candlelight and heartbeat. We'll begin with the ordinary people of antiquity, how they slept, what they feared, and what they did to keep nightmares away. Then we'll turn towards stories of individuals, dreamers, seers, and emperors, whose restless nights shaped history. Later, we'll drift into the mysteries of ancient rituals, charms, and the strange archaeological traces they left behind. And finally, we'll look upon the divide between the common sleeper and the mighty, how the dreams of kings were written into destiny. Let this be your bedtime relaxation and soft storytelling, a soft-spoken history documentary for a quiet night, a journey through relaxing history to fall asleep to, a gentle history sleep story made for fans of Roman history, archaeology, and calm narration. So dim the lights, let the night settle around you, let the ancient world drift closer. And as we begin this boring history for sleep, imagine yourself lying in a small clay-walled room, somewhere in the distant past. The air warm, the oil lamp flickering low, and outside, the silence of an ancient world that never truly sleeps. Imagine the world before electricity. No steady hum of machines, no flicker of neon, no whisper of a passing car. When the last lamp went out, the darkness was complete, a deep, living thing that pressed gently against the skin. For ancient people, the fall of night was not simply an end to the day. It was a transformation. Shadows grew longer, familiar shapes dissolved, and the mind turned inward. It was the hour when dreams began to stir. In a small Roman home, the hearth glowed faintly, its embers fading into dull orange. The family had eaten their evening meal, bread, olives, perhaps a small dish of lentils, and spoken softly beneath the low smoke of the lamp. As the light dimmed, the house fell silent except for the faint settling of the walls, the occasional bark of a distant dog. Sleep was not a single, uninterrupted passage, but a series of drifting moments. People would lie down, doze for a few hours, wake, pray, or think, and then drift off again. Between these intervals, the mind wandered freely, and in that half-conscious space, ancient fears waited. To sleep was to surrender control. The Egyptians believed that during the night, the the soul, might leave the body and wander. If it returned, you awoke. If it did not, you never opened your eyes again. Thus, the transition to sleep was both sacred and uncertain. They prayed to protective deities like Bes, a squat, lion-faced god who guarded sleepers from spirits that crept through dreams. Small images of him were carved beside beds, painted on amulets, or kept near infants. His fierce face was a promise that the night could be kept at bay. Elsewhere, in the warm lands of Greece, the philosopher might retire early, covering his head with a simple woolen blanket. Sleep was regarded as the cousin of death, a momentary voyage into the unseen realm shared with the departed. The poet Homer wrote that Hypnos and Thanatos, sleep and death, were brothers who carried men away from the battlefield. It was not morbid, only natural. To close one's eyes was to enter their domain for a time, to trust they would bring you safely back. In humble cottages, farmers slept beside their tools, the smell of straw mixed with the faint odor of earth and animals. Children slept close to their parents, wrapped in whatever cloth could be spared from the day's work. Their dreams were shaped by fatigue and hunger, by the rhythm of seasons and the pulse of labor. For the poor, nightmares were simply part of life's pattern, another reminder of how thin the line between comfort and fear could be. When a nightmare came, it was rarely seen as random. In many places, people thought the night itself was breathing through them. A sudden weight on the chest, a sense of paralysis, a whisper at the edge of hearing. These were signs of visitation. Something unseen had entered the room, resting upon the sleeper, feeding on their distress. The Norse called it the mare, an invisible being, neither ghost nor demon, that pressed upon dreamers until they gasped awake. And so the term nightmare came into the languages of Europe, a remnant of that ancient fear. To guard against it, small rituals emerged. A bowl of water placed by the bed to reflect bad spirits away. A sprig of rosemary, known to purify the air. Prayers muttered to saints, gods, or nameless powers before sleep. Even a simple act, turning the pillow over before lying down, might be seen as enough to change one's fortune. Night was a delicate thing, and one approached it with care. The Roman naturalist Pliny wrote that dreams were not to be trusted, yet he collected stories of those who took them seriously. Merchants sought guidance from dreams before journeys. Mothers feared that an ill dream might foretell sickness. A soldier, waking from a vision of fire, might delay his march, just in case the gods were sending a sign. For them, dreams and nightmares were woven into daily life like weather, unpredictable, but always meaningful. The rhythm of ancient nights was slow and uncertain. Fires burned low, and sleep came in waves. Beyond the walls, the world remained alive. Insects, dogs, the distant murmur of travelers. And under that canopy of sound, human breath joined the quiet chorus of the dark. To live in such a world was to know both comfort and unease. For every gentle dream, there might come a darker one, a dream that left the heart racing, the limbs heavy, the dawn strangely cold. And so, before surrendering to slumber, many paused, whispering a final word of protection to whatever gods might be listening. The night, after all, belonged to them. In the ancient world, protection during sleep was a matter of faith and habit. Every civilization had its own gentle routines meant to keep nightmares at bay, not through force, but through ritual, through familiarity. To fall asleep was to cross into a landscape beyond human control. And so, before surrendering to the dark, people sought invisible guardians to guide their dreams. In Egypt, the world of sleep was sacred. Dreams were messages from the divine, carried on the breath of gods like Thoth, the master of knowledge, or Serapis, who ruled over healing. Temples devoted to healing dreams stood along the Nile, their courtyards filled with incense and stillness. Sick or troubled people would travel for days to sleep within these sanctuaries, hoping that, in the depth of slumber, a god might appear and whisper the cure. This practice was known as incubation, and the ritual was calm, deliberate, and slow. The air within those temples would have been thick with the scent of burnt myrrh and cool river water. Priests moved quietly through the halls, guiding each visitor to lie upon a mat of reeds. They were told to clear their thoughts, to listen to the silence, and to wait. If a dream came, whether kind or terrifying, it was a message worth decoding. In Greece, dream interpretation became an art. Philosophers and healers alike studied dreams as if they were coded language. Artemidorus of Daldis, a man of the 2nd century, wrote an entire 5-volume treatise called Oneirocritica, the interpretation of dreams. He described dreams of flight, of drowning, of falling teeth, or burning homes, and what each might mean for the dreamer's fate. Even nightmares had purpose, he said. They were warnings or corrections, the soul's way of instructing the waking self. To ignore a nightmare was to ignore one's own reflection. And yet, among ordinary people, simpler superstitions guided the night. A piece of iron placed beneath the bed to keep away unseen forces. Shoes turned upside down to confuse the spirits that prowl the dark. Women wore small charms made from coral or jet stone, believed to absorb evil energy before it reached the dreamer. Children might be given a knotted thread, tied 7 times, to prevent the pressing spirit from finding their chest. It was all a quiet negotiation with the unknown. No one thought these objects powerful in themselves. Rather, they carried comfort, the reassurance that one had done something before surrendering to sleep. In Rome, the protective measures were woven into everyday household life. Laras and Penates, the domestic spirits, were honored before bed. A small bowl of wine or milk might be left on a table, a gesture of gratitude for another peaceful night. The household shrine, the lararium, often stood near the sleeping area. In its niche, tiny figures watched over the family. They were carved from wood or bronze, their surfaces polished by centuries of breath and prayer. To Romans, these were not idols, but companions, guardians of ordinary existence. If nightmares came, it was a sign that something had been neglected, a prayer left unsaid, an offering forgotten. Further north, in Celtic lands, people whispered of charms made from rowan berries, tied with red thread. They hung above beds or from the rafters to repel spirits. Fire, too, was sacred. Even a dying ember was believed to hold light enough to confuse malevolent visitors. To let the fire die completely was to leave one's household defenseless against the restless dead. So long as the faintest glow remained, peace endured. Dreams were also watched carefully for signs of intrusion. A nightmare, especially one recurring, was not dismissed. It might indicate a curse or an unquiet ancestor. A local wise woman or priest might be called to perform a cleansing, a calm ritual involving smoke, murmured words, or blessed water sprinkled across the threshold. The ritual was not violent, but gentle, rhythmic, like the act of breathing itself. It was believed that harmony could be restored simply through sound, a hum, a chant, a name spoken in the right tone. To modern minds, these beliefs might seem quaint, yet within them lies something universal, the quiet desire for safety when the world grows dim. Every age has its ways of warding off the dark. We, too, arrange our rooms before sleep. We check the locks, dim the screens, set an alarm. Not against spirits, perhaps, but against the unseen chaos of waking life. In this way, we are not so different from those who placed an amulet beneath their pillow thousands of years ago. And as the night deepened in ancient homes, people trusted these small protections. The weight of superstition gave structure to the unseen. To know that one had prayed, burned the incense, placed the charm, these were the anchors of rest. And when the body finally yielded to sleep, the mind could drift, confident that something or someone watched from the stillness beyond the lamp's last light. When the night deepened beyond silence, and even the last ember of the hearth cooled to ash, People in the ancient world believed that something else awoke. Not the household gods, not the gentle protectors, but the visitors, unseen presences that drifted between breath and shadow. These were not always malicious, yet they were never entirely kind. They belonged to the night, and the night belonged to them. To sleep was to invite them in. Throughout the Mediterranean and beyond, stories circulated about the entities that pressed upon dreamers. In the lowlands of Mesopotamia, clay tablets spoke of Lamashtu, a restless female spirit who crept into houses after dusk. She was said to bring nightmares to mothers and children, feeding not on blood, but on fear itself. To guard against her, people placed small terracotta plaques near the bed, carved with protective figures. The name of a demon, Pazuzu, was sometimes invoked to frighten her away, a paradoxical comfort where one dark spirit was used to repel another. The idea was simple. Darkness understood darkness, and only one who knew the night could defend you from it. In Greece, the concept took subtler form. There were whispers of shadowy daimons who visited sleepers, carrying dreams as gifts or punishments. They were neither angels nor devils, but something in between, intermediaries between gods and men. Philosophers speculated endlessly about them. Plutarch wrote that the mind, when freed from the senses, could perceive these spirits as fleeting shapes, half light and half thought. He described them not as monsters, but as mirrors of our own unspoken fears, reflections of desire or guilt given temporary form. When one dreamed of pursuit, or of falling, or of an unseen weight upon the chest, it was not an external demon, but the self whispering through shadow. Yet in the northern lands, these beliefs were less philosophical and more immediate. The night there was longer, colder, and heavier. Among Germanic and Norse peoples, tales of the mare endured. She was imagined as a ghostly woman, sometimes beautiful, sometimes withered, who sat upon sleepers and sent them visions of dread. Her touch brought paralysis, that helpless awareness between dream and waking. To drive her away, people turned their shoes inward by the door, or placed a knife beneath the bed, its blade pointing outward. Iron was the language of protection. It was said that no spirit could cross its gleam. In Celtic lands, the phenomenon was personified by the old hag, who perched on chests and stole the breath from dreamers. Those who experienced such nights would awaken drenched in sweat, convinced they had wrestled something invisible. The word hag-ridden survives even now, a quiet echo of that ancient fear. It's likely that what they experienced was a form of sleep paralysis, but for them, there was no medical name, only mystery. The body lay frozen, the mind awake, and the air heavy with presence. How natural, then, to imagine that something sat there, unseen but undeniably real. In Rome, the visitors of the night were cataloged as part of the vast, unseen order of things. The larvae, or restless spirits of the dead, were believed to wander after dark. They were not all malevolent. Many simply sought remembrance, or the warmth of familiar places. But when neglected, they grew angry, and their wrath came in dreams. The annual festival of Lemuria was dedicated to placating them. Fathers of households rose at midnight, barefoot, and performed the ancient rite. They walked through their homes silently, tossing black beans behind them to draw the spirits away. After 9 beans, they turned and spoke softly into the dark. With these I redeem me and mine. Then, still barefoot, they washed their hands and returned to bed, believing the restless had been soothed. Across all these lands, the boundary between sleep and the supernatural was porous. Dreams were not private experiences, but shared events linked to family, gods, and the landscape itself. To have a nightmare was not simply to suffer alone, but to participate in the mysterious life of the community. Priests interpreted them. Neighbors offered remedies. Even philosophers wrote treatises on their significance. The night was a collective world, not an isolated one. And so, each time a nightmare came, each time a sleeper felt that invisible weight, that unspoken fear, It was understood as part of a larger pattern. The world, they believed, was full of breath, human, divine, and spectral. You could not banish the night visitors entirely, for they were woven into the fabric of being. What you could do was treat them with respect. A whispered prayer, a turned shoe, a bowl of milk, small gestures that acknowledged the balance between seen and unseen. Imagine, for a moment, that quiet world, the stillness of a clay room, the faint perfume of oil smoke, the muted breath of a sleeper beneath linen. Outside, the wind passes softly over stone. Inside, somewhere near the edge of dream, the ancient night moves gently, watching, waiting, and whispering. It is not cruel, not kind, simply eternal. And the sleeper, wrapped in layers of ritual and faith, drifts peacefully between the worlds, trusting that dawn will come. Imagine, now, that you are no longer in a humble home, but in the marble stillness of an imperial chamber. The year is somewhere in the 1st century before our era. Outside, Rome stretches like a living organism, its streets quiet beneath the moon, its temples standing like pale sentinels over the sleeping city. Inside, within the vast palace on the Palatine Hill, lies a man whose dreams could shape the fate of nations. Gaius Octavius, later known to history as Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Even emperors, it seems, could not escape the mysteries of the night. Augustus, like many Romans of his age, believed that dreams carried divine messages. He recorded his dreams carefully, sometimes sending for priests or seers to interpret them before dawn. In the solitude of his chamber, surrounded by frescoes of gods and heroes, he would lie upon a low couch, his mind heavy with the burdens of rule. The air was perfumed with cedar oil and myrrh. Somewhere beyond the walls, the muffled sound of soldiers on night watch echoed faintly. Sleep came slowly, not as rest, but as surrender. There is an account from the historian Suetonius, who described how Augustus once dreamed that the god Apollo visited him, placing a radiant torch into his hands. When he awoke, the image lingered. He took it as a sign that his reign was divinely sanctioned, that light itself had chosen him. Soon after, he built the great temple of Apollo on the Palatine, where the dream had occurred. To later generations, the story became legend, the emperor who saw the god in sleep. But beneath the symbolism, one can sense something simpler, a man seeking reassurance in the language of dreams. Dreams and nightmares moved in the same space, and power did not make one immune to fear. There were nights when Augustus was said to wake suddenly, heart racing, murmuring prayers to his household gods. He kept a small statue of Apollo by his bedside, its features worn smooth by touch. If the emperor of the known world could not command his dreams, then perhaps no one could. In Roman culture, dreams of the powerful carried weight. A senator's nightmare could alter a vote. A general's vision could postpone a campaign. Before the Battle of Philippi, Augustus's ally and rival, Mark Antony, was haunted by a dream of his mother's ghost, weeping. He told his men of it, half as warning, half as justification for his unease. Dreams, after all, were accepted as omens. To ignore them was to defy the gods. Even Cicero, the great skeptic, wrote that though dreams could deceive, some seemed too precise, too vivid, to be dismissed entirely. When Augustus grew older, his relationship with sleep became uneasy. He was said to suffer from bouts of insomnia, wandering through his palace corridors at night, reciting lines of poetry to calm himself. Perhaps the same vivid imagination that helped him rule the world also denied him rest. He had restored order to a realm torn by civil war, but within him, the mind still flickered restlessly. The emperor was not immune to the whispers of conscience or of history. Roman physicians recommended various cures for troubled sleep. They suggested a light meal before bed, a cup of warm wine mixed with honey, or listening to soft flute music. Some prescribed amulets made of jasper, inscribed with phrases invoking quiet dreams. Others burned laurel leaves, believing that their smoke banished disturbing visions. Whether Augustus followed these practices, no one can say, but the empire's fascination with dream control was well known. In the temples of Asclepius, Roman citizens continued the Greek tradition of incubation, sleeping beneath sacred roofs in hopes of divine visitation. Even soldiers and merchants participated, leaving inscriptions describing their dreams and the cures they brought. To them, sleep was not private. It was a shared communication between the human and divine. The emperor's dreams were simply the grandest example of this universal practice. Augustus's successor, Tiberius, inherited not only the throne but also the same haunting awareness of dream and omen. Tiberius was deeply superstitious, keeping astrologers close by and consulting interpreters for even the smallest dream. When he dreamed of a collapsing tower, he ordered new fortifications across the island of Capri, where he later retired. To the modern reader, it may seem excessive. To the ancient mind, it was simply prudent. Night and fate were intertwined, and to sleep without regard for the messages of the gods was reckless. Even in their grandeur, these emperors were small before the infinite depth of sleep. Their marble palaces, their guards, their banners. None could protect them from the images of the mind. In the silent hours before dawn, when even the city's noise faded to nothing, they were alone with the phantoms of thought. Perhaps that is why the Romans spoke so softly of dreams. They knew that the same gods who gave them visions could also take them away. And so, as Augustus lay upon his couch of ivory and linen, half awake and half dreaming, he might have felt the faintest comfort in the knowledge that he was not alone. Somewhere, in countless smaller homes throughout the city, others too lay restless, slaves, merchants, mothers, and soldiers, all wandering through their own silent worlds of sleep. For all his might, the emperor's night was not so different from theirs. The darkness treated everyone the same. If the emperors of the ancient world dreamed of gods, the philosophers dreamed of meaning. To them, sleep was not only a rest for the body, but a window through which the soul could wander freely, unchained from flesh and noise. They spoke of dreams as if they were messages whispered through a veil, brief, fragile, and easily misunderstood. Among the thinkers of old, none pondered the language of dreams more deeply than Aristotle. He wrote that dreams were movements of the soul while the body sleeps. In his cool, deliberate tone, he described how the mind continued to see and hear even when the senses had fallen silent. Aristotle did not believe every dream came from the gods. Many, he said, were merely echoes of the day, a memory stirred, a thought unfinished. And yet, he admitted, sometimes dreams seemed to reach beyond reason, predicting illness or danger before it appeared. In that uncertain space, philosophy brushed gently against superstition. A generation later, Artemidorus of Daldis made a life's work of interpreting these visions. He traveled across the Greek world, collecting thousands of dream accounts for merchants, slaves, mothers, and priests. His book, Onira Critica, became a kind of dream encyclopedia. If one dreamed of the sea, it could mean a journey, of fire, an argument, of teeth falling out, the loss of family. Artemidorus treated each image like a riddle, believing that the gods spoke in symbols rather than words. To him, dreams were not divine decrees, but delicate metaphors, revealing what the waking mind dared not face. Imagine him, writing by lamplight, surrounded by scrolls filled with strange images, horses, birds, storms, weddings. Each dream a story, each story a small fragment of a larger mystery. Perhaps he wondered whether sleep itself was the truest mirror of the human soul. While philosophers searched for logic, the prophets of the ancient world sought revelation. In the Near East, in Egypt, and across the Levant, dreams were considered the favored medium of the divine. The Hebrew scriptures speak often of men visited by messages in the night. Jacob's ladder stretching toward heaven, Joseph's warning to flee, Daniel's terrifying visions of beasts and kingdoms. Each dream carried a warning or a promise. For these prophets, the dream world was not vague or symbolic. It was as real and sacred as daylight. Joseph, the interpreter of Pharaoh's dreams, stands as one of the earliest figures who turned nightmares into prophecy. When the Egyptian ruler dreamed of 7 thin cows devouring 7 fat ones, it was Joseph who saw the truth hidden beneath. 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. The story, whether one reads it as faith or folklore, captures something universal: the desperate need to find meaning in fear. The Pharaoh's dream, in its strangeness, is not so far from our own midnight anxieties, the unease that something in the darkness is trying to warn us. Centuries later, early Christian writers would continue this fascination. St. Augustine spoke of dreams that tested faith, of visions sent to comfort or to deceive. To him, sleep was a fragile border between the mortal and the eternal. He confessed that even when he turned away from worldly temptations, they sometimes returned in dreams. Proof, he said, that the mind could not easily escape its own shadow. In that thought lies a quiet wisdom. Dreams remind us that morality, memory, and desire do not sleep when we do. But not all were believers. Some saw dreams as dangers. The Stoic philosophers, stern, disciplined, suspicious of emotion, warned against taking them too seriously. They argued that the wise person should wake and forget, lest the dream world disturb the calm of reason. To them, nightmares were not omens but noise, the restless echo of an untrained mind. Still, even the Stoics admitted that sometimes, when the air was still and the body at peace, dreams seemed to speak with a strange, luminous clarity. In the temples, ordinary people continued to seek guidance through incubation. The process was simple yet sacred. They would bathe, purify themselves, and sleep upon the stone floors of a sanctuary dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing. Priests recorded the dreams that followed, and many claimed to awaken cured of sickness or doubt. Thousands of such inscriptions survive, carved carefully into marble. I dreamed the god touched my eyes with a feather. When I woke, I could see. I dreamed of a serpent whispering to me. When I woke, my pain was gone. Whether miracle or suggestion, the experience gave people hope. And hope, perhaps, was the truest medicine. Throughout these centuries, across empires and languages, one belief persisted: that sleep was not silence, but communication. A conversation between the human and the divine, between thought and instinct, between fear and wisdom. In that sense, every culture was trying to listen, to decipher the secret grammar of the night. As philosophy evolved, scholars began to ask whether the source of dreams lay not above but within. The physician Galen argued that dreams were signs of the body's condition, a fevered mind producing fevered visions. If one dreamed of smoke or fire, perhaps the stomach was inflamed. If of water, perhaps the humors were out of balance. He recorded such cases meticulously, blending science and mysticism into one continuous thread. Even then, the question remained unanswered. Were dreams messages from the soul, or just the murmurs of the flesh? When the ancient world finally faded and new faiths rose, the debate did not end. Monks recorded their dreams in cold monasteries. Poets turned them into allegories. And philosophers, from the deserts of Egypt to the schools of Athens, continue to ask, who are we when we sleep? The question, echoing softly through centuries, has never found its final answer. And perhaps that is why the subject remains so endlessly calm, so gently haunting. It reminds us that even the greatest thinkers, with all their words and wisdom, were still dreamers. They too closed their eyes each night and wandered into the same uncertain dark that we do. The candle flickers, the parchment cools, and somewhere, in that long corridor of history, Aristotle, Artemidorus, and Augustine still dream, forever caught between thought and mystery. Even the most powerful rulers were never entirely free from the shadows of sleep. Their nights were as full of mystery and unease as those of any common citizen, yet with consequences magnified by the weight of authority. For emperors, generals, and kings, A nightmare could ripple outward, influencing policies, armies, and empires. The dreams of leaders were not private. They were whispered about, interpreted, and sometimes acted upon with solemn seriousness. Take the case of Tiberius, who ruled after Augustus. He was said to be highly superstitious, particularly attentive to dreams and omens. A dream in which a tower collapsed or a river overflowed might prompt him to reinforce fortifications, adjust harvest expectations, or even postpone journeys. To modern eyes, these decisions may seem overly cautious or even capricious. To those living in the ancient world, however, dreams were threads in the fabric of fate. Ignoring them could be seen as tempting disaster. Nightmares were often more than personal fears. They were interpreted as warnings for the state. Senators and advisors would note them carefully. An uneasy emperor could call upon soothsayers to translate the language of the night, to transform restless images into actionable guidance. If a dream suggested betrayal, the council might alter political appointments. If it suggested victory, the armies might march with renewed confidence. Sleep, in these cases, became a tool for governance, as mysterious as it was necessary. Not all visions were frightening. Some were subtle nudges toward reflection. Augustus himself reportedly had dreams in which the gods reminded him of mercy, of balance, or of humility. It is easy to imagine him waking slowly, listening to the distant hum of the city, pondering the meaning of such quiet counsel. Even the small comforts of daily life, a warm blanket, the fragrance of oil, the rhythmic breathing of attendants nearby, could soothe anxiety and shape the interpretation of nocturnal messages. Other rulers relied on sacred intermediaries. Priests and seers played a crucial role, not only interpreting dreams, but guiding sleep rituals. The emperor's chamber might be arranged with amulets, inscriptions, and carefully placed lamps, each intended to invite favorable visions and ward off ominous spirits. In some cases, an entire day's decisions were deferred until the morning after a significant dream, trusting that the night had already spoken. Across the Mediterranean, the Greeks believed that some dreams were sent by gods like Zeus or Apollo. To a general preparing for battle, a nightmare of falling cliffs might be a warning to change tactics. A dream of a triumphant eagle could signify impending success. Philosophers cautioned that interpretation required care. Plutarch noted that dreams were as likely to mislead as to instruct, and that wise rulers weighed them against reason, observation, and counsel. Yet, the boundary between intuition and prophecy was thin. Sleep was a lens through which leaders glimpsed both the unseen world and the hidden corners of their own mind. Nightmares themselves carried symbolic weight. A restless emperor might dream of fire consuming the palace or rivers turning to blood. While the literal meaning was obscure, such images prompted reflection on the fragility of power. They reminded rulers that empires, like bodies, could be threatened by forces beyond immediate control. Even fear, in this sense, had utility. It focused attention, tempered arrogance, and nurtured caution. The cultural context made dreams especially potent. Romans, Egyptians, Greeks, and Hebrews alike believed that the night was alive with spiritual energy. Sleep was not merely a pause from duty, but a liminal space where gods, ancestors, and spirits could communicate with the living. For leaders, paying attention to dreams was a matter of prudence, not superstition. It was part of the invisible infrastructure of governance. Even a seemingly trivial nightmare might influence policies, military strategies, or personal decisions. Imagine Tiberius, pacing silently through the cool stone corridors of Capri at midnight, lantern in hand, recalling a dream of shadowy figures. His advisors wait in whispered anticipation. Outside, the wind moves through olive trees, carrying distant murmurs of the sea. Inside, the mind interprets, the heart measures, and the empire's fate rests quietly on the threshold of sleep. Thus, the stories of emperors remind us that sleep is never merely private and nightmares are never entirely irrelevant. They are mirrors, teachers, and occasionally messengers. Even for the most powerful, the night is an equalizer, a reminder that the human mind cannot fully command what it does not understand. The pattern continues. What happens behind closed eyes can ripple across history, shaping the choices of rulers and the lives of countless subjects. And as the first light of dawn begins to touch the marble halls, the emperor rises. The dream recedes, but does not vanish. It leaves traces in thought, in caution, in prayer. The world awakens, and history continues, quietly influenced by what occurred in the silent, shadowed realm of sleep. In this way, even ancient nightmares shaped the waking world one hushed breath at a time. Imagine walking through the quiet ruins of a long-abandoned temple. The stones cool beneath your fingers, the air thick with the faint perfume of incense long faded. Every carving, every inscription seems to whisper secrets of lives long gone, of hopes, fears, and the restless nights of those who came before. For many ancient cultures, nightmares were not simply private concerns. They were woven into ritual, symbol, and art. They were tangible, carefully recorded, and sometimes even celebrated. In Mesopotamia, dream amulets reveal an astonishing preoccupation with protecting the sleeper. Small clay figurines, often no larger than a hand, depicted warriors or protective spirits, placed beneath pillows or along the edges of beds. Some bore inscriptions asking the gods to ward off Lamashtu or other malevolent spirits, while others simply bore images of eyes, an eternal gaze to watch over the dreaming child. Archaeologists have found dozens of such artifacts in homes, temples, and graves, their smooth surfaces still warm to the touch after millennia. The subtle artistry suggests a calm reverence rather than fear, a quiet faith that the night could be managed through small, intentional gestures. In Egypt, one finds the same careful attention to dreams. Papyrus scrolls, elaborately illustrated, contain guides for dream interpretation, listing symbols and their divine meanings. A lotus, for instance, might signify rebirth or clarity. A snake could indicate danger, but also transformation. The act of writing and illustrating the dreams gave shape to the otherwise formless night. The scribe's hands moved slowly, deliberately, tracing patterns that had been used for centuries. The physical labor of creation itself was soothing, a ritual in miniature reflecting the calm order the Egyptians sought to impose on the unseen forces of the dark. The Greeks, too, left evidence of systematic engagement with sleep and dreams. Temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, doubled as places of incubation. Pilgrims would sleep upon stone slabs, sometimes surrounded by inscribed tablets describing their ailments and their expectations. If a divine dream appeared, priests recorded it, offered interpretations, and prescribed remedies. The temple walls were covered with votive offerings, miniature models of afflicted limbs, painted and carved in fine detail, tangible tokens representing the hopes of the dreamers. Even the simplest carving or inscription was both an offering and a shield. It was a quiet contract with the night. Protect me. Guide me. Let my sleep be fruitful. Across the Mediterranean, nightmares were often acknowledged with equal care. In Etruscan tombs, frescoes depict scenes of night terrors and shadowy beings, not in grotesque detail, but stylized, ritualized, and deliberate. They are not meant to horrify, but to record and understand. The deceased were offered protection in the afterlife, a continuation of the practices of the living. One can imagine a craftsman, brush in hand, painting the shapes of these spirits on a tomb walls, aware that his work would endure centuries, quietly mediating between fear and peace. Even in the Celtic lands of northern Europe, archaeologists have found evidence of charms and carvings intended to protect sleepers. Pendants of jet and bronze, painted or etched with abstract symbols, were sometimes buried beneath thresholds or sewn into clothing. The choice of placement was deliberate. Beds, doorways, and windows were portals of vulnerability. The shapes themselves are abstract yet deliberate, a calm geometry designed to keep the unseen forces at a respectful distance. All these practices speak to a universal pattern: the human desire to shape the unseen world through tangible acts. Nightmares were not ignored. They were documented, interpreted, and, whenever possible, mitigated. The act of recording a dream, carving it into clay, painting it on a wall, inscribing on parchment, was itself a form of calm mastery over the unknown. Consider the archaeologist walking among these ruins today. Every fragment of clay, every faded fresco, carries a whisper of the past. The shapes of demons and protective spirits, the stylized symbols of eyes, hands, or animals, speak to a world where sleep was both fragile and sacred. It is a gentle reminder that our distant ancestors, despite the vast differences of time and culture, shared the same vulnerabilities we do. They, too, feared the weight upon their chest in the dead of night. And they, too, sought calm in ritual, order, and symbol. Through these objects, through these carefully crafted signs, we glimpse not terror, but intention. The night is not chaotic, it is guided. The hands that etched these symbols knew both fear and comfort, and they expressed both in a medium designed to endure. In this way, archaeology does more than uncover artifacts. It uncovers quiet lives, contemplative minds, and deliberate acts of care, a bridge across millennia from the ancient dreamer to the modern observer. And so, as we imagine these spaces, temples, homes, tombs, we see that the ancient world was not dark in the way our imagination sometimes suggests. It was carefully observed, cataloged, and attended to. Nightmares existed, yes, but they were not overwhelming. They were understood, respected, and quietly managed through ritual and art. The night, with all its shadows, was a domain to be negotiated with care, and in that negotiation, humanity found both calm and continuity. Across the vast expanse of the ancient world, cultures developed myths to explain the shapes that haunted the night. These stories, gently preserved through oral tradition, art, and written record, serve as a soft framework for understanding the unknown. They were not tales of horror for entertainment, but tools for reflection, for order, and for calming restless minds. In Mesopotamia, Lamashtu remained one of the most notorious figures. She was described as a restless spirit, moving through households while the city slept. Yet the stories about her were not told with the intention of terrorizing children. Rather, they carried practical advice, protective measures, amulets, and rituals designed to guard the vulnerable. The myth softened the unknown into something that could be managed. It provided the comfort of structure in the unpredictable hours of darkness. Across the Mediterranean, the Greeks spoke of Ephialtes, the spirit of nightmares. He was said to press down upon sleepers, whispering fears and anxieties. Yet in artwork and literature, Ephialtes was often depicted in stylized form, a shadowy figure with abstract features, more suggestion than literal threat. The myths served as explanation and guide, offering instructions on how to respond to disturbing dreams, sleep in a sacred space, recite prayers, or meditate upon the day's events before laying down to rest. It was a gentle reassurance that nightmares, though unsettling, were part of the natural order of life. In Rome, the incubation temples continued to produce myth alongside medicine. Pilgrims would sleep upon sacred stone slabs, leaving behind inscriptions describing their dreams. Some described encounters with shadowy figures, others visions of gods or ancestors. Priests, recording these experiences, interpreted them for the dreamer and for the broader community. What we might consider superstition today was for them a quiet system of guidance and reassurance. The night was full of symbols, each carrying meaning and each gently shaping behavior without force or fear. Northern Europe offers another perspective. Among the Norse, tales of the mare described a spectral woman who pressed upon sleepers' chests, bringing visions of unease. Her visits, while disquieting, were not random. They were part of a narrative of caution and attention. a reminder to maintain order in the household and respect the unseen forces of the night. Iron and protective charms, carefully placed by the bed, were symbols of human agency. The myth allowed people to act to create small zones of safety, and in doing so, to soothe their minds before sleep. The Celts also used storytelling to mediate the night. Tales of the old hag or shadowy spirits in the woods were woven into poetry, song, and ritual. They instructed children and adults alike on proper conduct, how to keep their bed secure, how to treat the household with respect, and how to approach sleep with calm vigilance. The myths were not violent or grotesque. They were measured and symbolic, emphasizing the rhythm of daily life and the subtle balance between human action and the unseen world. In East Asia, similar patterns emerge. In ancient China, dreams were often interpreted as messages from ancestors or as signs of moral balance. The Zholi texts, among others, describe spirits visiting sleepers to offer guidance or correction. Nightmares were not mere disturbances. They were signals to adjust behavior, to cultivate virtue, and to maintain harmony in life. Small rituals before bed, lighting incense, arranging one's sleeping space, reciting gentle prayers, provided structure and comfort. In all these traditions, the night became a canvas for human reflection, a gentle interplay between the known and the mysterious. Across these diverse cultures, myths served as both explanation and reassurance. They acknowledged the shadows of sleep without overwhelming the mind. They offered guidance on how to live with the night, not in fear of it. And they allowed ancient people to engage with the unknown in a way that was calming, deliberate, and intentional. As we consider these stories today, we realize how deeply connected all humans are through sleep. Fear of the dark, of shadows, of restless visitors, it is a common thread. But so is the creativity and care used to mitigate that fear. From Mesopotamia to China, from Greece to the Celtic forests, humanity has found ways to understand and structure the night, using myth as both lens and balm. Imagine, then, a quiet evening in one of these ancient homes. A child listens to a softly spoken tale of a protective spirit. A parent adjusts charms above the bed. The fire burns low. Outside, the wind stirs leaves and branches, and the night moves gently, carrying dreams of both caution and comfort. In that balance of shadow and light, of story and ritual, the human mind finds calm. Even now, in our modern bedrooms, we carry echoes of these myths. We check locks, leave night lights on, or follow bedtime rituals that comfort us. Our ancestors did the same centuries ago, using story and symbol to transform fear into gentle attentiveness. And in that quiet connection across time, we are never truly alone in the night. Imagine walking slowly through an excavation site at dusk. The sun dips behind distant hills, casting a warm glow over weathered stones. Every artifact seems to breathe history quietly into the air. A fragment of pottery, a carved amulet, an inscription faded with time. Among these remnants lie the traces of human concern for sleep, dreams, and the restless shadows of the night. Archaeology offers a unique lens into how ancient societies understood the world between waking and sleeping. In Mesopotamia, for example, archaeologists have unearthed small clay figures representing protective spirits. Some are humanoid, others hybrid forms combining lion, bird, or serpent features. Placed near beds or thresholds, these figures served a practical purpose: to guard sleepers from the encroachment of nightmares or malevolent entities. The careful crafting of these objects, often painted with natural pigments, indicates more than superstition. They represent a deliberate, thoughtful attempt to impose order and comfort on the unknown. Similarly, terracotta plaques known as dream guards bear inscriptions invoking divine names. The texts, sometimes only a few lines, speak directly to the unseen. May no evil shadow rest upon this child. Let the gods watch over the sleeper as they do in daylight. Holding one in your hand, even now, You can almost sense the gentle intention of the person who pressed their fingers into the soft clay centuries ago. It is an intimacy preserved through time, a quiet connection between ancient anxieties and modern curiosity. In Egypt, archaeologists have discovered papyri filled with dream interpretations and protective rituals. They contain lists of symbols and their meanings, ranging from common animals to abstract images of geometric shapes. A dream of a snake might indicate transformation. A dream of water might suggest balance or renewal. Some papyri describe detailed procedures to encourage beneficial dreams or repel disturbing ones, including incense, meditation, or specific sleeping postures. The attention to detail reflects a culture in which the night was carefully structured, not left to chance. Even the smallest detail, the arrangement of a bed or the placement of a small statue, carried symbolic weight. Greek and Roman archaeological sites similarly reveal a rich attention to nocturnal practices. The Asclepius healing temples contain inscriptions left by pilgrims detailing their dreams, the interventions prescribed by priests, and the outcomes. Small votive objects, miniature limbs, painted figurines, carved images, were left as offerings, tokens of gratitude, or attempts to influence future sleep. Archaeologists note the patterns. These were not random acts of superstition, but systematic, deliberate rituals. The act of leaving a small carved token beside one's sleeping place was itself a calming gesture, a recognition of vulnerability paired with agency. Northern Europe also preserves evidence of ancient sleep rituals. Graves of Germanic and Norse individuals sometimes include amulets or iron objects, carefully positioned with respect to the sleeper. Some of these items bear abstract symbols thought to ward off nightmares. Others are shaped like small animals or symbolic motifs. Placed beneath the pillow or near the head, they reflect a careful consideration of both physical and spiritual protection. Even the simplest iron charm represents a quiet, persistent human attempt to create safety within the night. The Celtic regions yield comparable discoveries. Carved pendants, decorated stones, and charms placed above doorways or beds indicate that even ordinary households took sleep seriously. These objects were not only protective but also communal. They demonstrated shared understanding of danger, ritual, and calm preparation for the unknown. Archaeologists today marvel at the continuity. People separated by continents and centuries responded to the night with remarkably similar attention to detail. What is striking in all these sites is the care given to the small and subtle. The night was understood as both threatening and instructive. Sleep was not merely a pause from daily labor. It was a space to cultivate calm, to engage in ritual, and to negotiate with unseen forces. The artifacts themselves, the clay figures, votive offerings, and inscribed amulets, are gentle, deliberate, and intimate. They are evidence that the ancients did not seek to dominate the night, but to coexist with it. Through archaeology, we can trace these gestures of care. We see that every household, every temple, every community acknowledged the fragility of sleep. The act of carving, painting, or arranging objects was a slow, mindful interaction with the unseen. It speaks to a human instinct that transcends culture, the desire to understand the night, to manage fear, and to ensure peace during rest. So, as you imagine these ancient rooms, these quiet temples, these humble homes, picture the stillness. The flicker of torchlight on stone, the faint scent of herbs, the delicate placement of protective objects. Every gesture is deliberate, calm, and full of intention. The night remains mysterious, but in this interplay of ritual and artifact, humanity finds serenity. And through that serenity, even the shadows of nightmares become manageable, familiar, and softly, gently held in the hands of those who came before. Imagine yourself in the quiet of a noble Roman villa, the evening air cool and fragrant with the scent of burning oils and herbs. The household is already settled, attendants moving silently across marble floors, torches casting gentle, flickering light against painted walls. In the center of it all lies the elite master of the house, reclining on a couch woven with fine linens, surrounded by cushions embroidered with gold thread. Though the wealth and status of such individuals are evident, the night itself remains a universal experience, shared across the social spectrum, yet expressed differently in ritual, luxury, and precaution. For the elite, sleep was both private and ceremonial. It was a time for reflection, a gentle pause after the obligations of power, politics, and societal expectation. Noble Romans often adhered to carefully orchestrated evening routines. They might partake in a light meal, consumed slowly to promote comfort and calm. They bathed in warm water infused with oils and fragrances, softening the tension of the day and preparing the body for rest. Music, played softly on a lyre or flute, provided rhythm and predictability, aiding the transition into sleep. Even the positioning of pillows, the layering of blankets, and the opening or closing of windows was deliberate, designed to create a secure and soothing environment. Yet even wealth and ritual could not fully shield the mind from anxiety or dreams. The elite were aware that nightmares could touch them as readily as anyone else. Roman physicians and philosophers advised gentle interventions: chamomile or poppy-infused wine for relaxation, meditation on moral virtues to quiet troubling thoughts, and consultation with interpreters of dreams when visions were particularly vivid. Some households kept small protective amulets near the bed, carved figures of household gods, or inscriptions invoking divine protection. These objects were more than superstition. They were symbols of control, structure, and reassurance in a world of uncertainty. The preparation for sleep was mirrored by attention to waking rituals. Noble Romans often began their days with reflection upon the previous night's dreams. If a dream suggested good fortune or warning, the elite might adjust plans or appointments accordingly. A recurring vision could influence decisions, from managing estates to arranging alliances through marriage. In this way, sleep was woven into daily governance, a subtle rhythm shaping the order of lives and the exercise of influence. Contrast this with the experiences of ordinary citizens or slaves within the same household. While the elite enjoyed ritualized sleep and protective charms, others rested on simple mats or in shared rooms, sometimes on straw pallets or stone floors. Their sleep was more precarious, yet often communal, offering a different kind of security: the presence of neighbors, the warmth of shared spaces, and the rhythm of everyday life surrounding them. Though the environments were unequal, the experience of entering night remained fundamentally human. Dreams and nightmares did not discriminate. Even emperors, nobles, and generals could awaken in the night, heart quickened, whispering prayers, or turning to trusted confidants for counsel. Archaeological evidence reveals how these differences manifested materially. In noble homes, beds were elevated, crafted of wood, and adorned with soft fabrics. Fragrant oils, ornate draperies, and sometimes small statues or inscriptions formed a protective perimeter around the sleeper. Inscriptions invoking household gods, or even deities associated with sleep, such as Somnus, are found in marble or frescoed walls, subtly reminding occupants of divine oversight. Even small decorative objects, carved lions, birds, or abstract geometric shapes, could serve as guardians of rest. Every element of the room was carefully considered, turning the act of sleep into both comfort and ritual. Beyond personal comfort, sleep and dream interpretation carried social significance. A nobleman's dream could be shared with close advisors or family, not only as a reflection of personal anxieties, but also as guidance for household management. The household itself became a microcosm of society. The sleep of the elite informed the waking decisions of the household and, by extension, the broader community. Even small rituals, a whispered prayer, a recited line of poetry, the careful placement of an amulet, reinforced social bonds, tradition, and continuity. Yet despite all these luxuries and preparations, the essence of sleep remained universal. The mind wandered, dreams emerged, and the night quietly pressed against all who surrendered to it. The difference was in the details, the tools, the rituals, and the attentiveness afforded by status. The elite could shape their surroundings, invite protection, and record their dreams for posterity, but they were never entirely free from the same restless shadows that haunted every human mind. As the lamps dim, the attendants withdraw, and the villa falls into hushed stillness, one sees a convergence of order and vulnerability. The noble sleeps with preparation, ritual, and artifacts, yet beneath the silken sheets, the mind wanders freely. The night is impartial. The experience, however, is layered, cushioned by wealth, ritualized by custom, and softened by the careful orchestration of environment. Through these glimpses of elite sleep, we recognize a delicate interplay between power and human fragility, a balance that spans centuries and cultures. Now, imagine walking through the quieter quarters of the same Roman villa, past the opulent halls of the elite, toward rooms simpler, narrower, and humbler. The air here is cooler, carrying the faint earthy scent of straw, wool, and the lingering traces of daily labor. The beds are modest, straw-filled mats or simple pallets, sometimes layered with coarse cloth for warmth. Here, sleep is less about ritual or luxury, and more about necessity, rest, and brief reprieve from the relentless rhythms of life. Slaves and servants followed a strict daily schedule, often beginning their day long before the household awoke. Their evenings offered little leisure, and the transition to sleep was functional rather than ceremonial. Yet, despite the simplicity of the environment, there were subtle practices designed to bring comfort and ward off night terrors. Small charms might be tied to clothing, crude carvings placed near the head, or whispered prayers uttered before the night fully settled. Even in modest quarters, the human instinct to guard the mind during sleep persisted. Dreams for the lower classes were as vivid and meaningful as those of the elite, though their interpretation was more intimate, less public, and often tied directly to immediate concerns. A laborer dreaming of floodwaters might worry about crops or river levels. A servant dreaming of lost keys or overturned vessels could awaken with a keen awareness of the day's tasks. These dreams, while not officially recorded or consulted by priests, shape behavior in subtle ways, influencing caution, decision-making, and daily routines. The contrast between elite and commoner sleep is striking yet intertwined. While nobles could afford protective amulets, elaborate bedding, and dedicated interpreters for dreams, the essential human need remained the same. Both sought safety, rest, and reassurance from the unseen night. Both experienced fear, anxiety, and occasional wonder. The differences were in refinement, not in fundamental experience. Archaeological findings reveal these patterns clearly. Excavated servant quarters in Roman villas show simple sleeping mats, often near the hearth for warmth. In some cases, small personal items, a polished stone, a modest carving, or an inscribed token, suggest the presence of private rituals, quietly performed to safeguard sleep. Even without elaborate temples or priestly oversight, ordinary households practiced forms of nocturnal mindfulness. The night was respected, acknowledged, and, when possible, gently negotiated. Beyond domestic life, communal spaces also reflected how ordinary people engaged with sleep and dreams. In towns and villages, communal baths or shared sleeping areas offered warmth, companionship, and security. While privacy was minimal, there was comfort in routine and proximity. Neighbors and family members often exchanged stories of dreams and omens, providing informal guidance, shared warnings, and social reassurance. These interactions allowed communities to create a network of care and interpretation, softening the anxieties of the night. Even the most basic artifacts reflect attention to sleep. Simple clay tokens, modest carvings, or even small inscriptions on walls suggest that ordinary people actively shape their environment to invite calm. A carved animal or protective figure near a pallet was not merely decorative. It was an intimate acknowledgement of the night's uncertainty. In the quiet stillness of a room lit only by moonlight or a low-burning lamp, these gestures became acts of care, both for oneself and for those sharing the space. Consider the rhythm of their nights, the slow descent of darkness, the soft sighs of exhausted laborers, the occasional flicker of a lantern, the hush of companions settling beside one another. Even here, in the simplest quarters, the mind found ways to negotiate fear, to invite dreams of hope or guidance, and to rest despite the challenges of daily life. Sleep in these spaces was not passive. It was an active engagement with a world of shadow and possibility. And so, across social divides, from the wealthiest villas to the humblest mats, a pattern emerges. Humans in all circumstances have sought to understand, manage, and find calm in the night. The materials, the rituals, and the luxuries may differ, but the essence remains: a desire for safety, rest, and a gentle order in the hours when the conscious mind sleeps. In this contrast between elite and commoner, we find both the diversity and unity of human experience. No matter the status, the night is a shared space, a quiet domain where rituals, artifacts, and imagination intertwine to shape rest, reflection, and the subtle navigation of fear. Even now, if you imagine those humble quarters, the warmth of straw under your fingertips, the faint smell of herbs and earth, the gentle murmur of others nearby, the universality of sleep becomes apparent. The night, impartial yet tender, extends across centuries, connecting us to lives long past, reminding us of both fragility and resilience, and of the enduring human impulse to prepare, protect, and rest. Now, imagine ascending the grand staircases of the wealthiest Roman villas, or perhaps wandering the polished halls of the palace, where marble glimmers faintly in torchlight, and the soft scent of oils and perfumes lingers in the air. Here, sleep was not merely a pause or necessity. It became an indulgence, a play of luxury, and, at times, a reflection of status. The wealthy experimented with comfort, environment, and ritual in ways both elaborate and delicate, shaping their nights with intentional care, and sometimes with whimsical attention to excess. Beds were elevated, often raised on wooden frames intricately carved and polished, draped with linen spun from the finest flax or embroidered with gold thread. Cushions of varying sizes and textures were layered to create a sense of depth and softness. The very positioning of the sleeper could be considered science, with pillows arranged to support posture, airflow measured for warmth and comfort, and windows adjusted to catch gentle breezes without disturbing the quietude of the night. For some, the act of sleeping became a performance, a demonstration of both wealth and discernment. Even the use of scent was deliberate. Essential oils were infused into blankets or dabbed onto cloths. Herbs placed in small pouches beneath pillows. Lavender, rosemary, and myrrh mingled to create calming aromas, subtly influencing the mind and easing it into rest. Nighttime attendants, often skilled in both observation and subtle ritual, would tend to these needs, adjusting covers, lighting small lamps, or arranging charms near the bed, all while preserving silence and serenity. Yet luxury could also border on folly. Some wealthy Romans became so attentive to comfort and symbolism that sleep itself became almost artificial, a carefully constructed performance rather than a natural rhythm. Multiple mattresses, exotic furs, and elaborate feather cushions might insulate the sleeper from the world, while fans or water features added the gentle murmur of sound. It was a quiet indulgence, an intimate theater of rest. And while some might consider this unnecessary, for those living with wealth and responsibility, it provided reassurance, a cultivated sense of control over an otherwise unpredictable night. Dream interpretation, too, remained a carefully maintained practice among the elite. Specialist interpreters were consulted to record visions, both mundane and extraordinary. Dreams of gods, ancestors, or symbolic figures were meticulously documented in private scrolls or journals, sometimes illustrated with delicate sketches. Even the minutest vision could guide the following day's actions. An overlooked detail in a dream could influence dinner arrangements, seating of guests, or political decisions. The night became both private meditation and public influence, an interplay between rest and responsibility. Interestingly, these luxury practices often reveal subtle psychological insight. By controlling the environment, temperature, scent, sound, positioning, the wealthy could regulate not only physical comfort but mental ease. The rituals, the charms, and the attentiveness to subtle cues transformed sleep into a mindful act, a gentle meditation that combined physical and spiritual order. In this way, indulgence served a purpose beyond mere opulence. It provided security and predictability in an otherwise uncertain world. Yet even amidst all this care and ritual, sleep retained its essential unpredictability. Dreams did not always align with expectation. Nightmares could still occur, and the mind wandered in unanticipated ways. No amount of silk, fragrance, or charm could entirely control the mysterious realm of night. The elite, like all humans, were ultimately guests of their own subconscious, their carefully curated environments serving as guides rather than guarantees. There's a certain elegance in this delicate balance. The wealthy could play with comfort, indulge in ritual, and explore luxury, yet the universality of sleep remained. The night humbled every rank, reminding all who surrendered to it that vulnerability is inherent, and that control is always partial. In observing the indulgent practices of the elite, we recognize both ingenuity and human limitation, and the quiet wisdom that even excess cannot entirely master the nocturnal mind. Picture, then, the final moments of such a night. Attendants slip quietly from the chamber, oil lamps flicker low, scented herbs release their last fragrance into the cool air. The noble sleeper exhales, sinking into layers of cushions and blankets, surrounded by charms, inscriptions, and ritual objects. Outside, the wind moves through the trees, the distant city murmurs softly, and the night continues its eternal rhythm, impartial, quiet, and full of unseen life. Even in luxury, the night is a shared domain, linking the humblest straw pallet to the grandest marble chamber in a single, timeless human experience. As our journey through the nights of the ancient world comes to a close, let's take a moment to linger in the quiet spaces between history and imagination. From the humble straw mats of laborers to the layered silk cushions of Roman nobles, the rhythms of sleep have always been universal, threading through time with a gentle constancy. The ancients, like us, sought calm, reassurance, and a sense of order as darkness enveloped their days. They carved symbols, whispered prayers, arranged charms, and recorded their dreams, all in the hope of inviting peace into the fragile hours of slumber. Imagine the flickering torchlight in a Mesopotamian home, the soft scent of herbs in a Roman villa, the quiet footsteps of attendants in an Egyptian temple. Even in the shadows, there was care, deliberate gestures designed to shape the night, to negotiate with the unseen, and to transform anxiety into calm attention. These acts, simple or elaborate, remind us that the human desire for safety, rest, and understanding of the mind's hidden spaces is timeless. As we reflect on these rituals, myths, and objects, a gentle continuity emerges. Though centuries and continents separate us, the essence of sleep, with its dreams, its vulnerabilities, and its subtle comforts, remains unchanged. The stories of protective spirits, nightmare myths, and nocturnal rituals are not relics of fear, but enduring expressions of hope and mindfulness. They tell us that in every epoch, humans have found ways to coexist with the darkness, to cultivate calm, and to weave small acts of care into the tapestry of their nights. Perhaps now, as you settle in your own space, dim the lights, and breathe slowly, you can imagine the same quiet rituals. A token placed beneath a pillow, a whispered line of reassurance, a moment of reflection, small acts that bridge centuries and cultures. In that stillness, there is a connection, a subtle reminder that sleep is not merely a pause from life, but an active, intentional journey through the unseen and the unknown. If this kind of storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. There's something comforting in knowing others are sharing this quiet journey through history, drifting into sleep together. As sleepy historian, I hope these stories of ancient dreams, nightmares, and nightly rituals offer you calm, gentle reflection, and a sense of companionship across time. So, dim your lights, let the ancients whisper through the night, and imagine yourself lying beneath the same stars that watched over civilizations long past. Every amulet, every inscribed token, every carefully arranged cushion was part of a timeless human pursuit. Serenity amidst shadows, rest within ritual, and peace despite the mysteries of the mind. Close your eyes. Let the night guide you. Let the centuries of quiet wisdom cradle your thoughts. And as the world outside continues its rhythm, allow yourself to drift gently, safely, and calmly into sleep.